Thank you so much, Zeynep. And we've heard great stories from experienced entrepreneurs and new kids on the blogs. We've heard a VC perspective on global tech and our European ecosystem. We've had some lessons learned from a soccer world champion. But before we close, we're super excited to have a very, very personal conversation with one of the leading shapers of our European VC ecosystem and startup ecosystem. So big welcome, Niklas Zennström, and thank you so much for joining us.
Niklas hasn't only been a very successful entrepreneur as founder of Kazaa and Skype, but also an entrepreneur in venture capital as the founder of Atomico, which has been the backer of many frontier technology companies and European successes, such as Klarna, Graphcore, and Supercell. And what many don't know, he's also a very ambitious sailor. Of course, he's also part of the Visionaries family. Welcome, Niklas, and thank you for taking the time. And I will start out right away with actually a little bit more of a personal question. Can you take us back to the year 2000? You just started Kazaa, and then 2 years later, Skype. If I had met you back then, what kind of guy would I have met? How was Niklas in his mid-30s, and what was your life back then, and what drove you?
Sure, that's a long time ago. So no, great to be here. It was truly a long time ago, very, very different. That was kind of in the wake of the dot-com crash, when a lot of people thought that this whole thing with technology, internet entrepreneurship did not work. And if you were in Europe, people went back to the safe, corporate jobs, consulting, investment banking, and there was no tech ecosystem whatsoever. In the US and Silicon Valley, there were a few companies that survived because they've seen success through several cycles before. I left a good corporate job at Tele2 and all the entrepreneurial. I learned a lot, and I actually I resigned kind of February 2000, which was kind of a few weeks before NASDAQ crashed. Yes, back then I think I was very relieved to be an entrepreneur and not to have given up my career. But I was also, I think I was quite relentless, and I had a drive, but I really didn't know much about how to build a company all by yourself, and I didn't know, like, raising money from venture capitalists. It's like no one told me how to do that. It's like was a few people who helped invest in helped me a little bit, but there was really no kind of ecosystem at all to build from.
Thanks so much, Niklas. So, after Kazaa, Jolted, Altnet, Skype, I assume you could have started 15 more companies in the last 15 years, given the pace you already had back then. What made you decide to switch sides from being a founder to becoming a VC, or basically being an entrepreneur in VC? And maybe also the question, is there a chance that you switch sides again and start a new company all over again?
I get these questions like, don't you want to build a company? It's like, but I am. I think of myself as I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a company builder. I'm trying to build a large successful company with Atomico. But I actually, after Skype was, like, as you said, it was Kazaa, it was Jolted, and Altnet I was involved with, and Skype. So Skype was maybe the third or fourth company. So that was the one that was successful. And after that, we actually started two other companies, Rdio and Juiced, and put a lot of money into those, raised money, but none of them were successful. So, and at the same time, we started Atomico 15 years ago now. But the reason why I did that maybe is the most important thing, and why I didn't start, so I did start two other companies, but I think I did that mistake of being, thought that I didn't have, as a founder, I thought I could just, with money, I thought I could just invest in it myself and then hire people. Although as great as they were, I think that the founder need to be the CEO, otherwise, or the founders need to be operative in a company. That's not so. But I thought that was okay. There was a few things. Like, one thing was, like, I got so annoyed when I always failed to raise money for my companies before in Europe, because pretty much all European VCs wanted to kind of had very little risk and didn't want to have a big ambition, and rather copied an American model. Like, why don't you build like a copy of European copy of or whatever, Nordic copy of eBay or of Amazon or something else. And so we thought that there was really a need to create a new venture firm in Europe that had a founder DNA, but could also be really bold and encourage founders to think bigger and bolder, very much like some of the best Silicon Valley VCs have done for a long time. But also a firm that, of course, built on a lot of, had a discipline of having good investors, and thirdly, having people who had operational experience who can guide and help companies with scaling. So that was kind of, I thought that was the mission that I could take on. And with the fortune I had with Skype, I think it was also somehow a lot of founders looked up to me, and I realized I could probably influence them to some extent as well. But at the same time, potentially have a competitive advantage of winning over some founders. The other thing is also my ambitions level was always to beat myself. So whatever I do, I want to be better than I was yesterday. I want to be better than I was last year. So obviously I would have to tell myself, I'm going to beat Skype. And that was a pretty high hurdle. So it's like, that might be kind of a lot of frustration. So I said, why don't I change game? And that was also part of this. And since then I've been so excited about doing this, and we're building a firm for the next 100 years plus, and working with founders is just, I'm so passionate about it. So I don't think I'm going to kind of go and start another company anytime soon.
What was that actually like for you, going from entrepreneur to VC? What are some of the qualities and skills and personality traits that you have yourself, but maybe that you also, some learnings that you took from being a founder that you then brought to VC? Yeah,
I think a few things, like having been in the shoes of an entrepreneur, I can maybe have empathy with their journey, and therefore also kind of, I think, easier to build alignment and rapport with founders. I think I'm always, as an entrepreneur, I think, at least when I was an entrepreneur and also what I'm now, and always been someone who's trying to look at, how could the world potentially look like? How could a potential future look like? And so I was always trying to understand, looking at when you see a problem or something, how could the future look like in the future? And using that in my conversations with founders has maybe helped me to understand their vision, and then, so I think that's one thing. And then the other one here is, okay, what then is the strategy from the idea they have now to reach their vision? That's maybe the things I've been good at. Now, in the early days, when that was over biased on that, and we didn't pay too much attention to kind of pretty important things like unit economics, burn rates and churns, right valuation for where the stage are, you end up making a few bad investments, and so that was really something that was a great lesson, and over the years, and kind of from early also, but understanding that there's like, you have different strengths in a team. It's like, having listen, I think there's some to be a good venture investor, there's not a prescribed background you need to come from. There are some of the best venture investors in the world are coming from banking. Some of them are coming from being entrepreneurs, and some have been journalists. So, it's different backgrounds, but having diversity in that team and having different perspectives. So what we try to do at Atomico, at least, is that having a few people who are more operational, and people also who are really, really strong investors, and also people who are really good with understanding people and looking at the different perspectives together can make better decisions.
Which ultimately is also very comparable to starting a company. So maybe in the end, it doesn't really matter if you start a company or if you start a VC. You always need that perfect composition of team members that all complement each other. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for you personally, what's a lesson that you learned the hard way? Maybe also from sailing or from business life?
Yeah, sure. I think it's about when you're, when you're a leader, whether you're like, CEO for a company, entrepreneur, doing a sports team or whatever it is, it's all about getting the best people around you. And I think that's super important too. And maybe in the beginning, it's hard to convince the right people and spend the time to find the right people. And the right people are the ones who are super bright, ambitious, and share the vision and ambition and the mission with the founders. Spending time finding these people and developing them, and of course, and trusting and scaling that team. I think that was something that I certainly learned the hard way. The other thing is also to take advice and to listen to people, but still believe in your gut. And when your gut, specifically when the gut feel tells you, when you have a strong gut feeling, it's like listen to others, but over-index on your guts. Now, I think, and then there's about focus, and just because it's so hard to build a company and to be successful, so you need to kind of really kind of scale it down and kind of figuring out what are the things that we must do and what are the things that we don't have to do, and then don't do them. Just do the ones that you have to do, and really be focused, which is difficult. I found it super hard. I find it super hard today because I want to do more things. So I want to do more. So that's when it's good to have a team, when maybe you have some people who are really good operationally that can okay, that's all good with all these different things, but what are we going to do this quarter? What are we going to do next week? So that's for sure. Focus. It's and be really disciplined to what is really your core.
Switching gears a little bit. We all know that one of your big passions is the European tech ecosystem, and with Atomico, you also release on a yearly basis the big European tech survey. And we were wondering, since you have been one of the early and major shapers of the European tech ecosystem, really from the early days, as we just heard, and also one of the first believers in the potential to especially build large B2B category leaders out of Europe. What has changed? If you look backwards in time, 5 to 10 years ago, is really more of a conventional wisdom that large and successful tech companies could only be built out of San Francisco, out of the Silicon Valley. And now, fast forward to today, Klarna, Celonis, UiPath, many others, all coming out of Europe. What has changed? What's your prediction for the future?
Sure. I think this is about what you see, what we're seeing now, which is amazing. By the way, I'm so excited. Every day. We're so fortunate to be in this business and to be here today. But this is an accumulation of the flywheel and of talent, capital, innovation, and experience that keeps spinning faster and faster. And there's been recycling of this, been a recycling of talent, been a recycling of capital, innovation. And from each generation of startup and scale up generates a bunch of new entrepreneurs, generates angel investors, and some of them becomes venture investors with experience. And they're all learning from the founder of that company. And that is kind of what we've been seeing over the years now, accumulating, and each kind of cohort just get better and better. And we see that every year. Not only are there more companies that raising money, scaling. There are actually over 200 billion dollar plus companies today. We still call them unicorns. I really think we need to change the definition and or qualification to be a unicorn. Maybe $50 billion valuation is like at least become a little bit scarce, or maybe we're just setting the bar at 100 and just wait a little while. So this recycling. So there's nothing fundamentally changed. It's not some new policy that unlocked everything. Nothing of that. It's like we've had this amazing talent pool in Europe. We have some of the best universities, certainly some of the best technical universities in Europe. We have proven that we have had entrepreneurs for hundreds of years. We have some of the leading companies in automotive, in industry, fashion, kind of pharma, a bunch of different industries where Europe has, and they've been always created by entrepreneurs. So it's not something that is weird now that we have a lot of very successful enterprise and B2B business, because Europe, and of course Germany in particular, have had so many world leading industrial companies. So I think that so what's the future? We made it some kind of looked at, okay, how much value can be created really in European tech, and which is already a multi-trillion dollars of value in the private and public market. And what we see is that there are companies they're more quality companies becoming bigger, but we still are having created the really big tech giants, and I think we should be really proud of the companies you mentioned, and some of them will break through over 100 billion soon. But we don't have any European tech companies on that list of the 100 most valuable public companies in the world. And I think we really need to have an ambition, and certainly my ambition is that we can put some European tech companies on that list of the most valuable companies in the world. It's going to happen. That's just statistics and time. It's just because this flywheel is going to continue to. There's so much inertia now; it keeps being faster and faster. So it's just a matter of statistical distribution and time, because it takes time to build these big companies. So that's why I'm so excited about doing what we're doing, and also when about this recycling of capital and talent. I think Visionaries Club is a great example of this, because that's what you're doing. You're taking both entrepreneurs and you take family offices, investing their money, but also using their experience and investing in that next generation. So that, I think, is a great example of how this flywheel is spin. And we didn't have firms like Visionaries 10, 15 years ago. So now there's the whole seed ecosystem has just exploded with entrepreneurial investors. And of course, we're doing that as well. We have a bunch of successful entrepreneurs investing in Atomico. We have family offices, and we think it's just. And I think what our job as venture investors is to connect the dots and kind of bring these communities together and making this flywheel kind of spin faster, and doing that in a collaborative way. So it's going to be faster.
Yeah, thanks so much, Niklas. So we're working hard on this, building the next generation of hopefully $15 plus companies out of Europe. And we totally believe that this will happen. And I think something that really motivates us in the seed and pre-seed stage that we see is, that there's really a new generation of very, very strong B2B founders coming up that build amazing companies and take their knowledge and their motivation back to the universities and technical students to inspire the next generation of technical founders also to build technology companies. And maybe a fun fact, when I went to RWTH Aachen University 10 years ago, studying mechanical engineering, no one was about to start a company. Everyone wanted to work for BMW, Porsche, all those corporates. And one reason was also that we didn't have any founders in the tech space that came back to university and told us what's possible. And I think the beauty is in the last 5 to 10 years, we have companies like Celonis, UiPath, Graphcore, Personio, with really great founders that go have built companies in B2B and that go back to university and tell their story. And I think if we look at our ecosystem, whether it's Cambridge, Oxford, London, whether it's the German tech universities, Switzerland, Paris, there's a whole bunch of amazing tech students, and there's now really a cluster starting of entrepreneurs coming back to those universities, telling their own story and really inspiring those young engineers to take risks and start an own company. So this is really what motivates us. And speaking of Niklas, maybe if you allow us one last question, what one piece of advice would you give one of those engineering students in the beginning of their 30s that start a new company?
I think about follow your passion and gut instinct, and be bold, and make sure you get the best people around you.
I think that's those are good, perfect last words. Something that we're all striving for. So with that, Niklas, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing these very personal insights and also lessons from being one of Europe's most influential founders and VCs with us. That was truly inspirational. And with that, I'm handing back over to Rob for our wrap up of the Visionaries Unplugged event. Thanks, Niklas.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.